We are gathered in gladness once more, the special community that we call our church. A community of all ages that sings its songs, tells its thoughts, asks its questions, searches together with courage and with love.
The idealist who wants to make a difference is often called a do-gooder. Many Unitarians fall into this category. Your moral course is set in a variety of ways. The source of the moral values of those of us who have a Christian background would be the morality expressed in the Old and New Testament. The moral messages range from the draconian punishment in Leviticus to the unconditional love of Jesus Christ and the New Testament. For other Unitarians, the value systems of philosophers like Socrates, which are based on logic, or to the materialist notions of various modern philosophical systems, which recognize reason as the sole source of their system of ideals. Unitarians are divided among the do-gooders who are satisfied to plant the seeds of idealism, while others are not satisfied until they see the harvest of the plantings. What is the use of idealism in this world? Coupled with spirituality in the form of religion, we count on people to act better because they have attitudes and motivations that make society safer and more productive than it would be without spiritual and religious ideals. In the book of Acts, Jesus is described as asking the apostles to go to the ends of the earth, spreading his message of love and forgiveness, and await his return. The United States was colonized and became a nation after Christians left Europe, partly in order to more freely practice their religion. They brought to this country a form of formal religion that was an imperialist and colonialist version of the doctrines of Jesus. We find it difficult to find Jesus in their treatment of the Indians and their enslavement of Africans. But they call this a nation under God, the God of the Christians. How did their Christian doctrine work? Like the Jews in the Old Testament, they perceived themselves as chosen by God to have this land, even if they had to steal it from the Indians. When they found it difficult to get their land tilled and their cotton picked, they enslaved Africans and brought them to this country. Would the ideals of Jesus allow this to happen? Was it important to try to do what they wanted and needed without giving up some of the ideals of Jesus? Was there any practical way to do their thing without doing what they did to the Indians and to the Africans? Did they displease God by what they did? One solution is to decide that all things considered, it was for the good of the Indians and the slaves that they had the good fortune to be ruled by Europeans who could bring Jesus to them, together with the hope that they would have access to paradise as a result of their introduction to Jesus and to God. Capitalism captured Christianity during the Industrial Revolution, and religionists like John Calvin taught that different people had different callings. It was against God's will that we would challenge the status to which we were called. The Protestant ethic required that we work hard in the role to which we were born and fulfill our destiny. Lowered expectations provided a workforce that accepted hard, long hours of labor and low wages set by the capitalists, and a lifestyle that made workers productive and docile. This was what they called God's will and God's way. What do-gooders today what did the do-gooders do during the time of the colonization and the time of uncontrolled capitalist industrial expansion in this country and in Europe? Some felt the need to be charitable to the poor and sick. They combined their charity with Christian indoctrination that led to the generalized acceptance by the African slaves who accepted their status as the European religion that the Europeans had restructured to belittle the Jews who discovered the God of Christianity and exalted Jesus and his mother without too much concern about the fact that these people were Jews. Is it realistic that we can make plans for action of a nation which adheres to moral principles and ideals and still operate efficiently, productively, and fairly? Do we have to adjust our ideals, our ideas, or our forms of government and social action in order to deal with life in our times? A form of idealism that attempts to confront capitalist greed was put forth by Karl Marx and other political theorists based on the war between capitalists and workers. Based on a system of right and wrong they call the dictatorship of the proletariat, they took over the Soviet Union in Russia and attempted to make their system an international system. China inherited the mantle of this form of leadership and government and has come to the head of the class with a form of socialism that has been modified to retain their system but include some of the beneficial practices of entrepreneurship. Is the Chinese acceptance of some free enterprise practices a fundamental change of their communist philosophy, economy, and political philosophy, or is it a valid moral tool not at war with their basic system of proletarian dictatorship? Is it practical for communist nations to operate exclusively using socialist methods, or are they in good conscience free to improvise without a loss of moral principle? How many personalities have you had to accept to live with personally for yourself? As we have had to adjust to being more like Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, Paul Robeson, Martin Luther King, and the African nationalists, as well as the Black Panther Party, Democratic Party, and political independence, Chicago style. How many of these personalities have you had to fulfill or tried to fulfill? Are you comfortable belonging to a church society that is largely white? Does this do violence to your African nature? Have you decided that good white people are all right and that there is enough decency in the white people who are Unitarians that you are willing to sacrifice the fellowship of black faces to live in a system that says that all people are equally capable of being morally and spiritually good? Can you be a good Christian and not love all people, even your enemies? Is it possible to live and forgive all people who do you wrong and still have a practical and successful existence in this society? How hypocritical do you have to be to get along? The religion of the early Christians was not for punks. It was based on moral principles that required you to put into practice love for all mankind, of love for all mankind. It meant that to be real, you had to be prepared to die. many people have died in later years as a result of this thought and these actions. With the passage of time, Christians became emperors and colonialists and capitalists. How would they reconcile their status with their obligations to God and to Jesus? History is replete with acts of extreme violence by the people of Jesus who came to preach peace and love. Did the Crusaders have an obligation to be nonviolent and turn the other cheek? Or did they have to fight like Christian soldiers? As they lived in countries that were said to be living under God and God's will, did their Muslim adversaries who had submitted to the will of Allah have a choice other than violently resisting the efforts of people who stood in the way of bringing all people into the fold of the family of God under their extended control and discipline, the discipline and control of Muslims? Though a man of peace, Jesus did wage a war of words against hypocrites, whom he found to be particularly reprehensible people. He with force chased the money changers out of the temple. Does this suggest some of the actions of Christians who appear to be unchristian in the name of being practical? Do-gooders usually take actions that offer them no specific benefits but are done to benefit other members of the human family. Yet they are not free from criticism. Harm can come from impractical solutions and problems at times because that help gives out a monetary gift where seeds that could be planted or a hoe that could be used to till the soil would be more useful in the long term. Has your attempt to do good ever been subject to criticism? Buddha developed a system of looking at life in which you tried to find a middle path and follow it. It involved belittling material things and dealt to spiritual perfection. But the practitioners gave little advice about how to run a factory or a farm. The practice of the religion had its benefit to its practitioners, however, in helping them to achieve peace with themselves and with the universe. The mechanics of life in Buddhist countries, however, does not reflect the deep spirituality of the Buddha. Even his way of thinking is expressed by many social practices and rituals in these countries, but not expressed in industry and in business. Buddhism does not appear to be the answer to 2012 practicality in these countries. Can we save a world that is willing to die? Must Armageddon happen? Will peace only come after the ultimate war? Is it practical to think of logical means of being human and bringing humanity together by social policies and actions that logically make living on earth a cooperative and loving thing? Are we challenging God when we try to bring peace on earth, when the men of God, the prophets, have said that God's will is expressed in the Armageddon prophecy and that our efforts are futile? Unitarian Universalists generally are committed to, within our means, bring peace to the earth, equality among humans, and love among members, all the members of the human race. We will continue this course and allow the Spirit of God, Jesus, and smart humans to lead us to victory. Amen.